The storm came in sideways that October evening, and my Ford F-250 shuddered against the wind like something alive was pushing back. And I remember thinking about the thermos of coffee my wife Sarah had packed me that morning, still warm, still sitting in the cup holder, and how I might never get to drink it. That was the night I stopped believing that the forests of the Pacific Northwest held nothing worse than black bears and tweakers cooking meth in rusted trailers. That was the night I learned what hunted the timber company's land after dark, and why the old Quinault elders refused to speak its name aloud. My name is Colton Marsh. At 34 years old, I'd spent 6 years running night patrol for Evergreen Pacific Timber, covering nearly 14,000 acres of old-growth forest between the coast and the Olympic foothills. Before that, I'd done 8 years as a corrections officer at Monroe Correctional Complex, which means I'd seen violence, real violence, the kind that sprays and stains and screams. I thought that experience had inoculated me against fear. I thought wrong. The creature that stalked us through the rain and the mud and the howling dark was something my training never covered, something no prison yard brawl or lockdown drill could have prepared me for. The shift started normally enough. I clocked in at the security shack at 1800 hours, checked my gear, Motorola two-way radio, mag light, Ruger LC9 in my hip holster, and reviewed the incident log from day's shift. Marcus, who handled the afternoon patrols, had noted some suspicious tire tracks near Sector 7 and a downed tree blocking the fire road in Sector 12. Standard stuff. What wasn't standard was the note at the bottom, scrawled in Marcus's chicken scratch handwriting. Animal carcass found near Tower 4. Deer. Something big got to it. Looked staged. Weird. I remember reading that word, staged, and feeling a cold finger trace down my spine. Marcus wasn't the type to exaggerate. He'd been doing this job for 15 years, and I'd never known him to use language like that. Before I could ask him about it, the office door swung open and in walked Trouble wearing a $200 North Face jacket. "You must be Colton," the kid said, extending his hand like we were meeting at a country club. "Derek Whitfield. Mr. Aronson said you'd be expecting me." I was not expecting him. Derek Whitfield was the nephew of Gerald Aronson, our company's regional director, and apparently the boy had expressed interest in a career in natural resource management. What this translated to, in practical terms, was that I'd been saddled with a 23-year-old business school dropout who thought a ride-along with security would make a great story for his Instagram followers. "Nobody told me about a ride-along," I said. Derek's smile didn't waver. "It was arranged this morning." Uncle Gerald thought it would be educational. I wanted to tell him that his uncle could go to hell, but I needed this job. Sarah and I had just closed on our house in Sequim, and our daughter Lily was starting kindergarten in the fall. So I swallowed my irritation and handed Derek a high-visibility vest. "Stay in the truck unless I tell you otherwise. Don't touch my equipment. And if you have to piss, you hold it until we reach a checkpoint." "Got it, Chief." I was already regretting this. The rain started as we pulled out of the compound, fat droplets slapping against the windshield like the sky was spitting at us. The Weather Service had predicted a storm front moving in from the coast, but their models had underestimated its intensity. By the time we reached the first checkpoint at Sector 3, visibility had dropped to maybe 50 feet. And the trees on either side of the gravel road were swaying with an almost theatrical violence. Derek, to his credit, had stopped trying to make small talk. He sat in the passenger seat with his phone clutched in his hands, the screen's blue light illuminating his increasingly pale face. The kid might have been a trust fund disaster, but he wasn't completely stupid. He could sense that something about this night felt different. We just passed the old mill ruins when my radio crackled. "Marsh, you copy?" I grabbed the handset. "Copy. Go ahead, Elena." Elena Vasquez was the only other patrol officer on duty that night. She'd been with Evergreen Pacific for 12 years, longer than anyone else on the security team, and she ran the eastern sectors with a quiet efficiency that I'd always admired. Elena didn't waste words. She didn't make mistakes. And in all the time I'd known her, I'd never heard her sound nervous. She sounded nervous now. Something tripped the motion sensors at Tower 4. I'm about 20 minutes out, but the access road is flooded. Can you check it out? Tower 4. The same tower where Marcus had found the staged deer carcass. Copy that, I said. I'm en route. Marsh out. I turned to Derek. Change of plans. We're heading to the radio tower. What kind of motion sensors are we talking about? The kind that aren't supposed to go off unless something big moves through the perimeter. Could be a bear. Could be poachers. Either way, we need to check it out. The access road to Tower 4 wound through some of the densest timber on the property. Douglas firs and western red cedars that had been growing since before the Civil War. The canopy was so thick that even in daylight, the forest floor existed in a perpetual twilight. At night, with the storm raging overhead, it felt like driving into the mouth of something hungry. About half a mile from the tower, I spotted the deer carcass. Marcus's description hadn't done it justice. The animal had been opened up, that's the only way I can describe it, with a precision that bordered on surgical. The rib cage was spread wide, the organs removed and placed in a rough semicircle around the body. The head had been twisted backward on the neck, the dead eyes staring up at the rain-swept sky. I stopped the truck and killed the engine. "What are you doing?" Derek asked, his voice climbing an octave. "Why are we stopping?" "Stay here." I stepped out into the storm, the rain immediately soaking through my jacket, and approached the carcass with my flashlight raised. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating details I wished I could unsee. The cuts on the deer weren't made by claws or teeth, at least, not any claws or teeth I recognized. They were too clean, too deliberate. And the positioning of the organs, the way they'd been arranged in that semicircle, it looked like something had been practicing. Learning. That's when I noticed the tracks. They were pressed deep into the mud, clearly defined despite the rain trying to wash them away. 5 toes, like a human foot, but longer. Broader. And the prints led away from the carcass in a straight line, heading directly toward the radio tower. I was crouching to examine the tracks more closely when I heard it. A voice. Faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. "Help me!" I froze, my hand dropping to my holster. "Help me! Please!" The voice was coming from the trees to my left, maybe 30 yards into the darkness. It sounded female. Young. Terrified. Every instinct I'd developed in 8 years of corrections work screamed at me to call for backup, to wait for Elena. To not go chasing phantom voices into the pitch-black forest during a thunderstorm. But what if someone was actually hurt? What if there was a hiker or a lost camper out there, injured and scared and counting on me to find them? I keyed my radio. "Elena, what's your 20? Static. Then, still, flooded can't through." The transmission broke up, swallowed by interference. I tried again, but the storm had killed the signal. Behind me, Derek had rolled down the window. "What's going on? Who was that?" "Stay in the truck," I repeated. "Lock the doors." I started toward the tree-line, my flashlight cutting a pale swath through the rain. The voice came again, closer now, more insistent. "Please! Help me! I'm hurt! Where are you?" I called out. "Keep talking. I'm coming to you. Please! I'm so scared. Help me!" I pushed through a thicket of salal bushes, the wet leaves slapping against my face. The forest floor was spongy with decades of accumulated needles and decomposing wood, and each step felt like walking on something that was breathing. The voice led me deeper, always just ahead, always just out of reach. It took me almost 2 minutes to realize what was wrong. The voice wasn't moving. It was coming from the same direction, the same distance, no matter how far I walked. Like something was playing a recording. Like something was trying to draw me in. I stopped walking. The voice stopped too. For a long moment, There was nothing but the roar of the storm and the hammering of my own heart. Then, from somewhere above me, impossibly high, maybe 40 feet up in the canopy, I heard a new sound. Breathing. Slow. Wet. Deliberate. I raised my flashlight. The beam traveled up the trunk of an ancient Douglas fir, past the gnarled bark and the dripping moss, past the lower branches heavy with rain. And there, clinging to the tree like a massive spider, was something that should not have existed. It was humanoid. That's the word my brain kept repeating, because human was too close to the truth and too far from it at the same time. The limbs were too long, the joints bending in ways that made my stomach lurch. The body was covered in coarse, dark fur that glistened with moisture. And the head, God, the head, was something out of a nightmare. Elongated. Lupin. Filled with teeth that caught the flashlight beam and gleamed like wet bone. It looked down at me with eyes that held intelligence. Curiosity. Hunger. And then it opened its mouth and said, in the exact same voice that had been calling from the darkness, "Help me!" I ran. I don't remember the specifics of my flight through the forest, only fragments, branches tearing at my clothes, my boots slipping on wet roots. The sound of something heavy crashing through the underbrush behind me. I burst out of the tree-line and sprinted for the truck, my lungs burning, my vision narrowing to a single point of light, the yellow glow of the headlights cutting through the storm. Derek had done exactly what I'd told him not to do. He was standing outside the truck, holding his phone up like he was trying to capture video, his mouth hanging open in confusion. "Get in!" I screamed. "Get in the goddamn truck!" He must have seen something in my face, or behind me, because his expression shifted from confusion to pure terror in the space of a heartbeat. He threw himself into the passenger seat just as I reached the driver's side door and wrenched it open. I had the engine started and the truck in reverse before my door was even closed. Something hit the tailgate. The impact rocked the entire vehicle, and through the rain-streaked rear window, I saw a shape, massive, impossibly fast, disappear back into the tree line. Derek was screaming, a high-pitched wail that I barely registered over the roar of the engine. I slammed the gearshift into drive and floored the accelerator, and the F-250 lurched forward with a spray of gravel and mud. We made it maybe half a mile before the road flooded out. The culvert that normally handled runoff from the hillside had been overwhelmed by the storm. And what should have been a shallow stream was now a churning river of muddy water that stretched across the entire roadway. I braked hard, the truck skidding to a stop at the water's edge. "Turn around," Derek gasped. "Turn around, we have to go back. Back to where?" The thing came from that direction. I grabbed my radio and tried Elena again. This time, miraculously, her voice came through clear. "Marsh? I've been trying to reach you for 10 minutes. What's happening out there?" "Elena, listen to me carefully. There's something in these woods. Something I can't explain. It attacked us near Tower 4. We're trapped. The road is flooded at the Sector 5 junction. I need backup. Real backup. Call the county sheriff, call Fish and Wildlife, call whoever you have to call." There was a pause. When Elena spoke again, her voice was low and steady. "Describe what you saw." "Tall. At least 7 feet. Covered in fur. It had a face like a wolf, but it moved like, Elena, it was in the trees. It climbed like a goddamn monkey. And it could talk. It mimicked a human voice to lure me in." Another pause, longer this time. "Stay in your vehicle. Keep your doors locked and your windows up. I'm coming to you. The road, I'll find another way. Just stay put. And Marsh? Whatever you do, don't let it see you looking at it. They don't like being watched." The radio went dead. I turned to Derek, who had curled himself into a ball in the passenger seat, his expensive jacket soaked with rain and mud, his face the color of old paper. "She knows what it is," I said. "Elena knows." Derek didn't respond. He just stared out the windshield at the darkness pressing against the glass. The next hour was the longest of my life. I kept the engine running for heat and the headlights on for visibility, though the latter did little more than illuminate the falling rain and the wall of trees that surrounded us. Derek eventually stopped shaking and fell into a kind of catatonic silence, which was honestly preferable to the screaming. I watched the mirrors. I listened to the radio static. And I tried very, very hard not to think about what was out there in the dark, watching us. It came back around 21:30. I didn't see it at first, I felt it. A subtle shift in the atmosphere, a pressure change, like when a storm front moves through. The hair on my arms stood up. My teeth ached. And then, slowly, a shape materialized at the edge of the headlight beam. It stood on two legs now, its posture almost mockingly human. The rain ran off its fur in rivulets, and its clawed hands hung at its sides, the fingers flexing in a rhythm that seemed almost contemplative. It was looking at the truck. Studying it. Testing it. It took a step forward. I held my breath. It took another step, then another, approaching the driver's side with a deliberateness that made my blood run cold. This wasn't a wild animal investigating a strange object. This was a predator evaluating its prey, calculating angles and vulnerabilities with a cold intelligence that had nothing to do with instinct. It reached the door. I could see its face clearly now, the elongated snout and the pointed ears and the eyes, those terrible, knowing eyes, that reflected the dashboard lights like twin amber coins. It leaned close to the window, so close that its breath fogged the glass, and I saw its nostrils flare as it drew in our scent. Then it raised one clawed hand and, very gently, tried the door handle. The lock held. Thank God, the lock held. The creature's expression shifted, I swear it shifted, from curiosity to something that might have been frustration. It tried the handle again, more forcefully this time, and when the lock refused to yield, it began to move around the vehicle, checking each door in turn. Testing. Learning. Derek was whimpering now, a thin, keening sound that he probably wasn't even aware he was making. I wanted to tell him to shut up, to not draw attention, but I couldn't make my voice work. All I could do was watch as the creature completed its circuit of the truck and returned to the driver's side window. It stared at me for a long moment. Then it spoke. "Let me in." My wife's voice. Sarah's voice, coming from that monstrous mouth, perfect in every detail, every inflection. "Colton, honey, let me in. It's cold out here." I closed my eyes. I bit down on my tongue until I tasted blood. And I did not answer. The creature waited. When I didn't respond, it tried again, this time using a child's voice, high and sweet and painfully familiar. "Daddy? Daddy, I'm scared. Please open the door. Lily." It was using Lily's voice. I don't know how it knew. I don't know how any of this was possible. But I kept my eyes closed and my hands clamped on the steering wheel, and I did not move and I did not speak, and eventually, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the voice stopped. When I opened my eyes, the creature was gone. But the test wasn't over. Around 2200, the creature returned with a new approach. This time, it didn't try the doors. Instead, it began to circle the truck at a distance of about 20 feet, moving in a slow, patient orbit that never varied in speed or direction. Around and around it went, its eyes never leaving the vehicle, its clawed feet leaving deep impressions in the muddy road. I realized, with mounting horror, what it was doing. It was watching our fuel gauge. The needle had been hovering near the halfway mark when we'd stopped. Now, after nearly 2 hours of running the engine for heat, it had dropped to a quarter tank. At our current rate of consumption, we had maybe 3 more hours before the truck died and left us exposed. The creature knew. Somehow, impossibly, it understood that we needed the engine to survive, and it was prepared to wait us out. I killed the headlights to conserve power. The darkness swallowed us immediately, and Derek let out a strangled cry of protest. "We need to save fuel," I said. "It's going to be a long night. It's out there." "That thing is right out there." I know. But as long as we stay in the truck, we're safe. I wasn't sure I believed that anymore. But it was the only hope we had. Elena's voice crackled over the radio at 2247. Marsh, I'm approaching your position from the north. I found an old logging trail that bypasses the flood. ETA 15 minutes. What's your status? It's still here, I said, keeping my voice low. It's been circling us for the past hour. Elena, what is this thing? How do you know about it? There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with something I'd never heard from her before: resignation. The Quinault have a name for it. They call it Stena, the walker between. The old-timers say it's been in these woods since before the first humans arrived. Normally it keeps to the deep forest, the places where nobody goes. But sometimes, when the conditions are right, it comes out to hunt. What conditions? Storms, darkness, isolation. It needs all three. Another pause. Marsh, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to not ask questions. Just listen. There was a crew that went missing in Sector 9 back in '08. 5 men, experienced loggers, gone without a trace. The company wrote it off as a workplace accident, equipment failure, operator error, take your pick. But I found one of them. Just one. He was 20 miles from the worksite, stuffed into the hollow of a fallen cedar like a bear caching meat for winter. He'd been partially eaten. And his face. She stopped. His face was frozen in an expression I hope I never see again. He died terrified, Marsh. Whoever he was, whatever he saw in his final moments, it broke him before it killed him. I looked out at the darkness surrounding us. So how do we stop it? You don't. You survive it. You wait for dawn. That's all anyone's ever done. Dawn is 8 hours away. I know. That's why I'm coming. I'm not leaving you out there alone. The connection crackled and died. I spent the next 10 minutes inventorying our resources. My Ruger held 7 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. I had a mag light that could double as a blunt weapon. In the truck bed, secured under a waterproof tarp, were the emergency supplies, flares, a first aid kit, a fire extinguisher, and, miraculously, a full can of emergency gasoline. The gas could buy us time. But getting to it meant getting out of the truck. I explained my plan to Derek. You want me to do what? His voice cracked on the last word. I need you to create a distraction. When I give the signal, you hit the horn. Lay on it. Don't stop until I'm back in the cab. And where will you be? Getting the gas can from the truck bed. If we can refuel, we can make it until Elena arrives. Derek shook his head violently. No. No way. I'm not doing that. You saw that thing, you saw what it can do. If we run out of fuel, we die. It's that simple. That creature isn't going to get bored and wander off. It's hunting us, Derek. And right now, our only advantage is that it doesn't know we're aware of its strategy. The moment we show weakness, the moment the engine dies, it will attack. He stared at me, his eyes wide and wet with fear. Then, slowly, he nodded. Okay. Okay. Tell me when. I took a deep breath, checked my pistol, and reached for the door handle. The creature was on the far side of its circuit when I made my move, maybe 40 feet away and partially obscured by underbrush. I slipped out of the cab as quietly as I could, keeping my body low and my movements slow. The rain had slackened somewhat, but the wind still howled through the trees, and I used the noise as cover. The truck bed was slick with water. I hauled myself over the tailgate and fumbled for the tarp, my fingers clumsy with cold and adrenaline. Beneath the canvas, I found the gas can, a red 5-gallon plastic jug that felt blessedly full. I was reaching for the handle when I heard the breathing. It was close. So close that I could feel the warmth of its exhalations on the back of my neck. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up, my heart slamming against my ribs like a caged animal. Don't turn around. Whatever you do, don't turn around. The breathing continued, slow and deliberate. I could hear the wet rasp of its tongue, the subtle click of its claws on the metal tailgate. It was right behind me. Close enough to touch. Close enough to kill. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed by terror, waiting for the blow that would end my life. Seconds. Minutes. An eternity compressed into a handful of heartbeats. Then, from inside the cab, Derek did exactly what I told him to do. The horn blared, shattering the silence with a sound like the end of the world. The creature reacted instantly. I felt the wind of its movement as it launched itself toward the front of the truck, drawn by the noise like a shark to blood. I grabbed the gas can and threw myself over the side of the truck bed, landing hard on the muddy ground, the impact driving the air from my lungs. I was on my feet before I'd even finished exhaling, sprinting for the driver's side door. I could hear the creature attacking the cab now, the screech of claws on metal, Derek's screams mingling with the endless blast of the horn. I wrenched the door open and threw myself inside, slamming it shut just as a massive form lunged past the window. The truck rocked with the impact of its body against the door, but the lock held. We were safe. For now. It took me 20 minutes to refuel the truck while keeping the engine running. I had to work in stages, opening the driver's door just wide enough to pour gas into the tank, then slamming it shut when the creature circled back to our position. Derek had stopped screaming but hadn't stopped shaking. His hands were clamped over his ears, his eyes squeezed shut, his lips moving in what might have been a prayer. By midnight, we had enough fuel to last until dawn. By 1 a.m, Elena arrived. Her truck materialized out of the darkness like an answer to a prayer, headlights blazing, engine roaring. She pulled up beside us and rolled down her window, and I saw that she was holding a shotgun with a barrel that gleamed like oil in the dim light. "Follow me," she said. "There's an old deer stand about a mile north. We can hold position there until sunrise." "A deer stand? We're going to leave the trucks?" "The trucks are liabilities now. It knows they're our shelter. It's going to keep testing them until it finds a way in, or until we make a mistake. The deer stand is elevated, reinforced. Our ancestors used to build them as defensive positions. It's our best chance." I didn't want to leave the truck. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stay inside the metal shell that had protected us this long. But Elena had survived an encounter with this thing before. She knew more than I did. I grabbed my pistol, my flashlight, and the fire extinguisher. Derek, moving like a sleepwalker, followed me out of the cab and into Elena's truck. We drove through the night. The deer stand was built into a massive western red cedar, about 30 feet off the ground, accessible only by a rickety wooden ladder that looked older than I was. Elena went up first, her shotgun slung across her back, moving with a confidence that suggested she'd done this before. Derek followed, his movements clumsy but determined. I brought up the rear, scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. We made it to the platform without incident. The deer stand was larger than I'd expected, maybe 12 feet square, with wooden walls that rose to chest height and a corrugated metal roof that rattled in the wind. Elena had stocked it with supplies, bottled water, canned food, blankets, and what looked like an antique radio with a hand crank. She saw me looking at the radio. "It's connected to the Forest Service network," she said. "If things get bad, I can call for extraction. Why haven't you called already?" She looked at me with those dark, knowing eyes. "Because they won't come. Not at night. Not for this. The brass knows about the Stena Marsh. They've known for decades. But they've made a decision, a calculated decision, that acknowledging its existence would be worse than covering up the deaths it causes. So they pay settlements to the families, classify the incident reports, and pretend everything is fine. That's insane. That's bureaucracy." I sank down against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Derek had already curled up in the corner, wrapped in a blanket, his eyes vacant. Whatever composure he'd had left had been stripped away by the night's horrors. Elena sat down beside me, her shotgun across her lap. For a long moment neither of us spoke. "You did good out there," she said finally. "A lot of people would have panicked. Would have gotten themselves killed." I was terrified. That's what courage is. Being terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. She reached out and touched my hand, just briefly. Just enough to feel the warmth of her skin against mine, and something passed between us that I couldn't quite name. Recognition, maybe? Understanding. The shared weight of a truth that the rest of the world wasn't ready to accept. "What happens now?" I asked. "We wait. We watch. And when the sun comes up, we go home and pretend this never happened." "I don't know if I can do that." "You don't have a choice." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Your wife. Your daughter. They need you. They need you to come home and be normal and not tell them about the monster that lives in the forest. Can you do that?" I thought about Sarah's face when I walked through the door each morning. I thought about Lily's laugh, high and pure and innocent. I thought about all the things I would have to carry, all the secrets I would have to keep, to protect them from this horror. "Yeah," I said. "I can do that." We settled into wait. The creature came for us at 0300. I'd been dozing, not sleeping, just drifting in that liminal space between consciousness and dreams, when Elena's hand clamped down on my arm. I was instantly awake, my heart already racing, my hand closing around the grip of my pistol. "Don't make a sound," she breathed. Below us, at the base of the ladder, something was moving. I could hear it testing the wooden rungs, shifting its weight experimentally, probing for structural weaknesses. The deer stand was old but solid. The lumber had been treated with something that made it slick and hard to grip, but I knew that wouldn't stop the creature for long. It had shown intelligence before. It would figure out how to climb. Elena raised her shotgun. I heard the ladder creak. Then another creak, higher this time. The creature was ascending. "The moment it clears the platform edge," Elena whispered, "you empty your magazine into its center mass. Don't aim for the head, the skull is too thick. Go for the chest. The lungs. Slow it down so I can finish it." "Can we kill it?" "I don't know. But we're going to try." The ladder groaned under the creature's weight. I could hear its breathing now, that same slow, wet rasp that had frozen me in place back at the truck. It was so close. So damnably close. Elena's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the creature spoke. "Elena." It was a man's voice. Deep. Familiar. Loaded with affection and sorrow. Elena's face went white. "Elena, honey, why did you leave me? Why did you leave me alone in the dark?" "That's not him," Elena said, but her voice was shaking. "That's not Michael. Michael's dead. I'm so cold, Elena. So cold and alone. Please. Let me in. Let me come home." The ladder creaked again. The creature was still climbing. "Elena." I grabbed her arm. "Elena, we have to, I know." She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and opened them again. The fear was still there, but something harder had settled over it. Resolution. Purpose. "I know." The creature's head appeared over the edge of the platform. It was smiling. That terrible, elongated face was twisted into an approximation of a human smile, all teeth and hunger and ancient malice. Its eyes found Elena's, and for a moment, something passed between them, recognition, maybe, or challenge. Then Elena pulled the trigger. The shotgun roared, deafening in the enclosed space. The creature's head snapped back, a chunk of its skull and fur exploding into the darkness. It screamed, a sound I'd never heard before and hoped never to hear again, and lost its grip on the ladder. I was at the edge of the platform before the echo faded, my pistol raised, firing into the falling shape below. I saw my rounds hit, saw the creature's body jerk with each impact, saw it crash to the ground 30 feet below with a sound like a sack of wet meat. It didn't get up. For a long moment, there was no sound but the rain and the ringing in my ears. Then Elena was beside me, reloading her shotgun with hands that shook only slightly. "Is it dead?" I asked. "I don't know." She pumped a fresh shell into the chamber. "Let's find out." We descended the ladder slowly, covering each other, checking the shadows for any sign of movement. The creature lay where it had fallen, a dark mass against the darker ground. Elena approached it with her shotgun raised, and I kept my pistol trained on its head. It was still breathing. Even with a fist-sized hole in its skull, even with half a dozen rounds in its chest, it was still breathing. Slow. Shallow. But unmistakably alive. "What now?" I asked. Elena didn't answer. She just stepped forward, pressed the shotgun barrel against the creature's skull, and fired. The head came apart. She fired again. And again. And again, until the shotgun clicked empty and there was nothing left of the creature's skull but pulp and splinters. She stood there for a long moment, chest heaving, the empty shotgun hanging at her side. Then she turned to me, and I saw that she was crying. "His name was Michael," she said. "Michael Vasquez. My husband. He was one of the loggers who went missing in '08. I didn't know what to say. So I did the only thing I could. I stepped forward and pulled her into my arms and held her while she wept." The sun rose at 0630. We burned the creature's body with gasoline from Elena's truck, then scattered the ashes and buried what remained under a pile of rocks. Derek watched from a distance, still wrapped in his blanket, still not speaking. Whatever innocence he'd carried into these woods had been stripped away, leaving behind something hollowed out and fragile. By 0800, we were back at the compound. By 0900, we were giving our statements to a man in a gray suit who didn't give his name or his affiliation. He listened without expression, taking notes on a tablet computer, asking occasional questions that suggested he already knew the answers. When we finished, he stood and buttoned his jacket. "The official report will state that you encountered a hostile animal, most likely a cougar, and were forced to defend yourselves. The company will provide counseling services and paid leave for all involved parties. Do you have any questions?" "That's it?" I asked. "We're just supposed to pretend this didn't happen." The man's expression didn't change. "Mr. Marsh, there are approximately 8,000 miles of wilderness in the Olympic Peninsula alone. That wilderness contains things that the human mind was never designed to comprehend. The choice before you is simple. You can accept this reality and move forward with your life, or you can attempt to expose it and destroy everything you care about in the process. Your family. Your career. Your sanity." He produced a business card and set it on the desk. "If you experience any symptoms of distress in the coming weeks, nightmares, flashbacks, difficulty concentrating, call this number. We have specialists who can help." He left without waiting for a response. Elena and I sat in silence for a long time. "What are you going to do?" she asked finally. I picked up the business card. It was blank except for a phone number. No name, no affiliation, no indication of who or what I'd be contacting. "I don't know," I said. "I honestly don't know." I went home to Sarah and Lily that afternoon. I hugged my wife longer than usual, and when she asked why, I told her it had been a rough night. She didn't press. She never does. That's one of the things I love about her. That evening, while Lily was playing in the backyard, Sarah and I sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the mountains. The sky was clear, the storm having moved on to punish someone else, and the world looked peaceful. Normal. Safe. "You're different," Sarah said. "Something happened out there. Nothing I can talk about." She nodded slowly. "Will you ever be able to tell me?" I thought about the creature's face. About its voice, using my daughter's words to try to lure me to my death. About the things that lurked in the spaces between civilization, patient and hungry and old beyond imagining. "I hope so," I said. "Someday." It wasn't a complete answer. But it was the truth. 6 months have passed since that night. Derek Whitfield left the state 3 weeks after our encounter. I heard through the company grapevine that he'd had some kind of breakdown, that he was receiving treatment at a private facility somewhere in Arizona. I never saw him again. Elena transferred to a desk position at the regional office. We email occasionally, but we never talk about what happened. Some things are too heavy to carry in words. I'm still working patrol. I know what's out there now. I know what lives in the darkest corners of the forest, waiting for storms and darkness and isolation. And I know that there are others, more creatures, more horrors, more things that the official reports will never acknowledge. But I also know something else. I know that I survived. That Elena survived. That when the horror came for us, we fought back and won. That has to count for something. I still have that business card, tucked in my wallet like a talisman against the dark. I haven't called the number. I'm not sure I ever will. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls through the trees and the rain drums against the roof, I take it out and look at it. And I wonder. Last week, I found new tracks near Tower 4. They were the same as before, 5 toes, elongated, pressed deep into the mud. But these were different in one crucial way: they were smaller. Younger. The thing we killed that night wasn't alone. And whatever else is out there, it's growing up. I haven't told anyone. Not Elena, not the company, not the man in the gray suit. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share, too likely to get the wrong people killed. But I've started keeping records. Photographs. GPS coordinates. Maps of the territories where the creatures seem to hunt, the patterns they follow, the signs they leave behind. If I can understand them, if I can learn their habits, their weaknesses, their limits, then maybe, someday, I can find a way to stop them. Or at least to warn the people who come after me. There's a part of me that wants to quit. To pack up my family and move somewhere flat and treeless, somewhere the forests don't hide ancient terrors in their shadows. But I know that running won't help. These things have been here since before humans walked this continent. They'll still be here long after we're gone. The only choice is whether to face them or to live in ignorance. I've made my choice. Every night, I climb into my truck and drive into the darkness. I patrol the same roads, check the same checkpoints, file the same reports. And all the while I watch. I watch and I wait and I remember. Because that's what survivors do. We carry the weight of what we've seen, and we use it to keep others safe. It's not heroism. It's not courage. It's just the price of having eyes that have been opened. Sarah knows something's different. She can feel the distance between us, the space where the secrets live. But she doesn't push. She just holds me a little tighter when I come home in the mornings, kisses me a little longer when I leave at night. She's stronger than she knows. Stronger than I am. Sometimes, when Lily is asleep and the house is quiet, I sit on the porch and stare at the tree line. The forest is only half a mile from our property, close enough that I can hear the wind moving through the canopy. It's a beautiful sound, really. Peaceful. Natural. But I know what lives in there. And I know that peace is only an illusion. Last night, around 2 a.m, I heard something outside. It wasn't much, just a branch snapping, a rustle in the underbrush, but it was enough to send me bolting for the window. I stood there for 10 minutes, pistol in hand, watching the shadows for movement. There was nothing. Probably just a deer. Or a raccoon. Or one of the 100 harmless creatures that inhabit the woods around our home. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching back. I've thought about reaching out to Elena. About asking her if she's noticed anything unusual, any signs that the creatures are expanding their territory. But I don't want to bring her back into this world, don't want to reopen wounds that are still healing. So I keep my vigil alone. The man in the gray suit calls sometimes. He never identifies himself, just asks how I'm doing, whether I've experienced any unusual symptoms. I give him the same answer every time: I'm fine. Everything is normal. He knows I'm lying. I can hear it in his voice, that careful neutrality that masks something deeper. But he doesn't press. He just reminds me to call if I need anything, and then the line goes dead. I wonder how many people like me there are. How many survivors, how many witnesses, how many carriers of impossible truths. Maybe there's a whole network of us, scattered across the country, each bearing our own private horror. Or maybe I'm alone. Either way, the job goes on. Tomorrow night, I have another patrol scheduled. Sectors 3 through 9, including Tower 4. I've requested that the motion sensors be upgraded, that the old cameras be replaced with infrared units capable of capturing movement in complete darkness. The company approved the request without argument. I think they know more than they let on. But for now, I do my job. I watch the forest. I protect the things that can be protected. And when the darkness comes, I meet it with open eyes. Because that's what it means to survive. Not just to live through the horror, but to carry its weight forward. To be changed by it, shaped by it, defined by it. The Stena took something from me that night, my innocence, my peace of mind, my ability to see the world as safe and ordered and rational. But it also gave me something in return, purpose. I will not let what happened to Elena's husband happen to anyone else. I will not let another family be destroyed by creatures that exist outside the boundaries of official acknowledgement. I will watch, and I will learn, and when the time comes I will fight. The forest holds many secrets. But so do I. This is my record. My testimony. The truth that no official report will ever contain. I'm writing it down not because I expect anyone to believe it, but because I need it to exist somewhere outside my own head. If you're reading this, if somehow, against all odds, these words have found their way to you, then you need to understand something. The world is bigger than you know. Darker than you imagine. Filled with things that your ancestors understood but your modern mind has been trained to deny. They are real. They are hungry. And they are patient. But they can be fought. They can be survived. I am living proof. My name is Colton Marsh. I am 34 years old. I work night patrol for a timber company in the Pacific Northwest. And I know what hunts in the dark. 3 weeks after I started keeping my records, Elena called me at home. It was the first time we'd spoken directly since her transfer to the regional office, and the sound of her voice, strained, urgent, stripped of its usual composure, sent ice water through my veins. "They're moving," she said. "The tracks you reported near Tower 4. I cross-referenced them with satellite imagery and thermal scans from the Forestry Service. There's a pattern, Colton. They're not just hunting anymore. They're migrating." I stepped onto the back porch, away from where Sarah was preparing dinner. Migrating where? East. Toward the populated areas. Toward the towns. The implications hit me like a physical blow. The creatures had always stayed deep in the old-growth forests, in the places where humans rarely ventured. That isolation was the only thing keeping the body count manageable. If they were moving towards civilization. How long do we have? Based on the rate of movement? Maybe 2 weeks before they reach the outer suburbs. Maybe less if the weather turns. I closed my eyes. Behind me, I could hear Lily laughing at something Sarah had said, the sound bright and innocent and utterly unaware of the darkness closing in. "What do we do?" Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice had hardened into something I recognized. The same cold resolve she'd shown that night in the deer stand. "We finish what we started." The plan came together over the next 72 hours. Elena had contacts, people in the Forestry Service, in the Wildlife Management Division, in agencies whose names she never spoke aloud. People who knew what lived in the deep woods and had spent their careers trying to contain it. She reached out to them, called in favors, assembled a team of specialists who understood what we were dealing with. There were 5 of us in total. Elena and myself. A man named Garrett who'd spent 20 years tracking wolves in the Canadian Rockies and had encountered something far worse during a solo expedition near Yellowknife. A woman called Dr. Reyes, who worked for a government agency she refused to name, specializing in what she called anomalous wildlife management. And finally, a Quinault elder named Thomas Brightwater, whose family had been fighting the Stena for generations. We met at a cabin deep in the Olympic backcountry, far from prying eyes and official oversight. The walls were covered with maps, photographs, autopsy reports from incidents that had been classified and buried. Looking at the scope of what had been hidden, the decades of deaths, the systematic cover-ups, the institutional blindness, I felt something cold settle in my chest. "How many?" I asked. "How many people have died?" Dr. Reyes consulted her tablet. "Confirmed kills attributed to Stena activity since 1952, 437. Probable kills where evidence was insufficient for confirmation, another 212. That's just in the Pacific Northwest. The creatures have been documented in 11 states and 3 Canadian provinces. And nobody's done anything about it. Containment has been the priority." Her voice was clinical, detached. "The public isn't ready to accept the existence of apex predators that can mimic human speech and outthink trained hunters. The panic alone would cause more deaths than the creatures themselves." Thomas Brightwater spoke for the first time. He was old, 80 at least, with skin like weathered leather and eyes that held centuries of accumulated knowledge. "My people tried to warn yours," he said. "When the first settlers came, we told them about the walkers between. We told them to stay out of the deep forests, to respect the boundaries that had been set since the world was young. They didn't listen. They never listen." "Can they be killed?" Garrett asked. "The one Elena dropped that night, it stayed down. That means they're mortal." Thomas nodded slowly. "They can be killed. But not easily. And never permanently. The Stena are not individual creatures. They are expressions. Manifestations of something older and deeper. Kill one, and another will rise to take its place. The forest creates them as needed. Then what's the point?" I demanded. "If we can't stop them permanently, why are we here?" Thomas turned those ancient eyes on me. "Because sometimes stopping them temporarily is enough. The young ones, the ones whose tracks you found, they are not yet fully formed. They are learning, growing, testing their boundaries. If we can destroy them before they mature, we can buy time. Perhaps decades. Perhaps generations. And the migration? A coming of age. The young ones are leaving the deep forest to hunt in new territory, to establish their own domains. If they succeed, if they reach the populated areas and begin to feed, they will become too powerful to stop." Elena spread a topographical map across the table. "Thomas has identified the most likely route they'll take. There's a narrow valley about 15 miles north of here, the only passage through the mountain range that doesn't require crossing open terrain. If we can intercept them there, we can bottle them up. And then?" Dr. Reyes produced a metal case from her bag. Inside, nestled in foam padding, were 6 cylindrical devices about the size of soup cans. "Thermobaric charges," she said. "Military grade. Each one generates a pressure wave capable of liquefying organic tissue within a 50-foot radius. We plant them along the valley walls, wait for the creatures to enter the kill zone, and collapse the entire passage on top of them." Garrett whistled low. "That's a lot of firepower. These aren't ordinary animals." "Ordinary firepower won't work." I stared at the charges, thinking about the creature that had tested our truck doors with such patient intelligence, that had used my daughter's voice to try to lure me to my death. Could something like that really be killed by explosives? Or would we just be making it angry? "What's the catch?" I asked. Dr. Reyes met my eyes. "Someone has to stay behind to trigger the detonation manually. The valley walls will block remote signals. Once the creatures enter the kill zone, there won't be time to escape." Silence fell over the cabin. "I'll do it," Elena said. "No." The word came out before I could stop it. Elena, you've already given enough. Your husband. Your peace of mind. You don't have to. This isn't about what I have to do, Colton. It's about what I need to do. She looked at me with those dark, knowing eyes. Michael's been dead for 15 years. But every night, I hear his voice. I hear him calling my name from the darkness, begging me to let him in. That thing took more than his life. It took his soul. His memory. Everything he was. Her voice cracked, just slightly. I can't live with that anymore. I can't spend another decade waiting for the next storm, wondering if tonight is the night they finally come for me. There has to be another way. Thomas Brightwater shook his head. There is not. The Stena are drawn to those who have survived them. They remember. They hold grudges. Elena will always be a target. Unless she becomes the one doing the hunting. I wanted to argue. I wanted to find some alternative, some clever solution that would let everyone walk away. But looking at Elena's face, the peace that had settled over her features, the acceptance, I knew there was nothing I could say. She had made her choice. All I could do was help her see it through. We moved out at dusk. The valley Thomas had identified was a 3-hour hike through some of the most punishing terrain I'd ever encountered. We traveled in silence, conserving our energy, our senses straining for any sign of the creatures. Dr. Reyes had equipped us with thermal imaging goggles and motion sensors, but the technology felt inadequate against something that had been hunting these forests since before humans discovered fire. We reached the valley entrance just after midnight. It was a narrow defile carved between two granite cliffs, maybe 40 feet wide at its broadest point. The floor was covered with loose scree and fallen timber, and a seasonal stream trickled through the center, its water black and cold in the darkness. Perfect ambush terrain, Garrett muttered. For us or for them. We worked quickly, planting the thermobaric charges at strategic points along the valley walls. Dr. Reyes showed Elena how to operate the manual detonator, a simple device with a safety switch and a large red button that seemed almost absurdly mundane given what it was designed to do. Once you trigger it, you'll have approximately 4 seconds before detonation, Dr. Reyes said. That's not enough time to reach minimum safe distance. You understand what that means? Elena nodded. I understand. We set up a concealed observation post at the valley entrance, hidden behind a fallen log that offered a clear view of the kill zone. Thomas produced a bundle of dried herbs from his pack and began to burn them, muttering words in a language I didn't recognize. What is that? I asked. Bait, he said. The smoke carries a scent that the Stena cannot resist. It reminds them of their prey. Their hunger. The smoke drifted into the valley, curling through the darkness like ghostly fingers. We settled in to wait. They came at 0300. I sensed them before I saw them, that same pressure change, that same electric tingle that had preceded the creature's appearance back at the truck. The air grew heavy, thick, saturated with a smell like wet dog and rotting meat. Then I heard the breathing. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a chorus of wet rasps that seemed to echo off the valley walls. Through my thermal goggles, I saw shapes moving in the darkness, 4, 5, 6 of them, flowing through the trees like shadows given flesh. They were smaller than the one we'd killed, but no less terrifying. Their movements had that same wrong quality, that same sense of joints bending in ways that nature never intended. And their eyes, God, their eyes, glowed like embers in the thermal display, hot and hungry and ancient. They entered the kill zone. Elena's hand closed around the detonator. I grabbed her arm. Wait, I breathed. There's another one. Coming from the north. I was right. A 7th creature was picking its way down the valley wall, larger than the others, moving with a careful deliberation that suggested greater age and experience. It was circling around, approaching the kill zone from a different angle. If Elena triggered the charges now, it would survive. And it would remember. I'll draw it in, I said. Colton, no. But I was already moving. I broke cover and sprinted into the valley, my boots slipping on the loose stone, my flashlight cutting wild arcs through the darkness. Behind me, I heard Elena scream my name, heard Garrett curse and chamber a round in his rifle. The creatures reacted instantly. The 6 smaller ones turned toward me, their heads snapping around in unison, their lips peeling back to reveal rows of teeth that gleamed like wet ivory. They began to move, flowing across the valley floor with that terrible, boneless grace. But I wasn't interested in them. I was watching the 7th creature. The big one. The one that had been hanging back. It had stopped on the valley wall, its amber eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I could see it calculating, weighing its options, deciding whether I was worth the risk. I raised my flashlight and pointed it directly at its face. "Come on, you son of a bitch," I said. "Come and get me." The creature's expression shifted. I saw something that might have been anger, might have been offense, might have been something entirely alien that my human brain couldn't properly interpret. Then it dropped from the wall and began to run. I turned and sprinted back toward the valley entrance, the creatures converging behind me. I could hear their claws on the stone, their breathing growing louder, closer. The entrance was maybe 50 yards away. The kill zone was behind me. I wasn't going to make it. I dove behind a boulder just as the first creature lunged, its claws raking the air where my head had been. I rolled, came up firing, my pistol barking in the darkness. The rounds hit home, and the creature stumbled, but it didn't fall. They were all around me now, 6 of them, 7, their bodies forming a closing circle. I could smell their breath, feel the heat of their bodies. The big one was pushing through the others, its jaws opening wide. "Elena!" I screamed. "Now! Do it now!" For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world turned white. The thermobaric charges detonated in sequence, each one a sun being born in the valley's depths. The pressure wave hit me like a physical wall, lifting me off my feet and hurling me through the air. I slammed into the ground, the breath driven from my lungs, my ears ringing with a sound like the end of everything. When I could see again, the valley was gone. Where the kill zone had been, there was now a crater of smoking rubble. The cliff walls had collapsed inward, burying everything beneath 100,000 tons of granite and debris. Nothing could have survived that. Nothing. I staggered to my feet, my body screaming with pain, and looked for the others. Garrett was down, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead, but he was moving. Dr. Reyes was helping Thomas Brightwater to his feet, the old man's face pale but alive. And Elena was standing at the edge of the crater, the detonator still clutched in her hand. She hadn't gone in. She had triggered the charges from outside the kill zone. I limped toward her, my legs barely supporting my weight. Elena, I couldn't do it," she said. Her voice was distant, dreamlike. "I was going to. I was ready. But when I saw you run in there, I thought." She shook her head. "I thought about what you said. About giving enough. About having something to live for." She turned to look at me, and I saw tears streaming down her face. "Michael would have wanted me to live, Colton. He would have wanted me to find peace." I put my arms around her and held her close. Behind us, the crater smoldered and settled, the last remnants of the creatures buried beneath a mountain of stone. It was over. The official report said there had been a seismic event, a natural landslide triggered by the recent storm activity. The timber company conducted a cursory investigation, found nothing unusual, and classified the incident as a routine geological occurrence. No one mentioned the creatures. No one mentioned the explosion. Thomas Brightwater returned to his people with news that the young walkers had been destroyed. He told me that the elder Stena would not venture out of the deep forests for many years now. They had learned that the humans in this territory were not easy prey. Dr. Reyes disappeared back into whatever shadow agency had spawned her, taking her thermobaric charges and her classified files with her. I never learned her first name. Garrett went back to Canada. He sends me postcards sometimes, photographs of wolves, of mountains, of forests that look peaceful but undoubtedly hold their own secrets. And Elena stayed. She's working at the regional office now, handling incident reports and resource allocation. It's quiet work, boring work, the kind of work that lets her sleep at night. We have lunch together sometimes, when our schedules align. We don't talk about that night in the valley. We don't need to. Some things don't require words. I'm still on patrol. Still driving the same roads, checking the same checkpoints, watching the same tree lean. But it's different now. The weight I carry feels lighter somehow, shared with others who understand. The creatures are still out there. They always will be. But so am I. 3 months after the valley, I came home from a night shift to find Lily waiting for me at the door. She was holding a drawing she'd made, a picture of a forest, with trees and animals and a bright yellow sun. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," I said. "What's that in the corner?" She pointed to a dark shape half hidden among the trees. It had 4 legs and glowing eyes and teeth that were just a little too big. "That's the shadow dog," she said. "He watches from the trees. But he can't hurt us because you keep us safe." I stared at the drawing, my heart pounding. "How do you know about the shadow dog, Lily?" She shrugged with the simple innocence of childhood. "I dreamed about him. But in my dream you were there too." "You scared him away." I pulled her into a hug and held her tight. "That's right, sweetheart," I said. "I'll always scare him away. I promise." That night, after Lily was asleep and Sarah had gone to bed, I sat on the porch and watched the moon rise over the mountains. The forest was quiet, peaceful, filled with nothing more threatening than owls and deer and the whisper of the wind. But I knew better. I knew that somewhere in those shadows, ancient eyes were watching. Waiting. Remembering. Let them wait. Let them remember. My name is Colton Marsh. I am a father. A husband. A protector. And I will never stop fighting for the people I love. That is my oath. My burden. My purpose. The darkness is vast and deep and filled with horrors beyond imagining. But I have learned something that the creatures will never understand. Love is stronger than fear. Hope is brighter than shadow. And as long as there are those willing to stand against the night will never truly win. This is my story. This is my truth. And this is how it ends. Not with screaming. Not with death. But with a father holding his daughter, promising to keep her safe. Some promises are worth dying for. Some are worth living for. I know which one I choose.